In an attempt to revive faltering peace negotiations with the Taliban, the Obama administration proposed a new prisoner swap deal with the militant movement. According to Reuters, the new proposal would see an exchange of several Taliban fighters held in the Guantanamo detention facility for a U.S. soldier held by Taliban allies in Pakistan. An anonymous source familiar with the issue said that the U.S. would first move 5 senior Taliban fighters to Qatar before Taliban releases Sergeant Bawi Bogdal, the only American prisoner of war.
The new proposal constitutes a concession to Taliban. Under the previous deal, the militants held in Guantanamo would have been divided into 2 groups, and the release of Bergdahl was required first as a gesture of goodwill. 26-year-old Bergdahl is believed to have been abducted in southern Afghanistan in June 2009. He has since been held by the Taliban-affiliated Haqqani network somewhere in northwestern Pakistan.
The White House has been trying to broker a prisoner swap deal through Qatari officials. The operation was always meant to be a high-risk diplomatic initiative, but many observers saw it as an opportunity to open the door to peace negotiations between Taliban and the Afghan government, as well as to build confidence in the relations between the militant group and President Hamid Karzai.
Coalition forces spent over 10 years fighting Taliban on the Afghan territory, but the movement remains a force to be reckoned with. The Taliban's leadership planned to formally open a political office in the capital of Qatar, Doha, raising hopes that a diplomatic breakthrough is near. However, in March, Taliban said it would withdraw from the talks, saying U.S. negotiating position was inconsistent. The latest developments in the prisoner swap deal could change that.
Both diplomatically and politically, giving up 5 of the most dangerous Guantanamo detainees is a precarious move for Obama. He can't risk the Afghan campaign going awry just months before the elections. In addition, many on Capitol Hill oppose the prisoner swap deal, arguing that the fighters are criminals implicated in bloody crimes against America and would soon be back on the ground to perpetuate more attacks.
One of the prisoners up for the exchange is Mullah Mohammed Fazl, Taliban deputy defense minister, classified as enemy combatant and high-risk detainee by the U.S. Captured in 2001, he is believed to be responsible for the killing of thousands of Shia Afghans between 1996 and late 2001. The group also includes Nurullah Nouri, a former top military commander, former Deputy Intelligence Minister Abdul Haq Wasik, and Hairullah Harkwa, a former Interior Minister.
Worst of all, under the new deal, the transfer would not guarantee the release of the American prisoners of war, let alone butter up Taliban enough for it to return to the negotiating table. There is also said to be a considerable opposition to the negotiations with Taliban itself. Ahmed Rashid, a prominent Pakistani author and expert on the Taliban, told Reuters, "The Taliban doesn't want a vacuum in Afghanistan or a civil war with the North. They know they can't win. The elements that have been dealing with the U.S. government basically want a deal."
InFocus spoke about the chances for success of the new U.S. tactic with Alexander Rytov, associate professor at the Moscow Institute of International Relations.
I think that the negotiations with Taliban is a really very complicated and very difficult process. At the same time, some form of reconciliation or agreement which could be found with them could afford promotion and progress and advance in many directions of the Western foreign policy in the Middle East. I believe that today the beginning of the negotiations with Taliban is rather logical and is a really timely moment because the Arabian Spring, supported by the Western countries and the United States, gives some new perspectives for the Muslim organizations in many countries where the Arabian Spring occurs. In any case, the combination of Arabian Spring with parallel talks with Taliban could settle, maybe not for a long time, but for some time, the situation in Afghanistan. And I think that this background could really help finding some first steps, some first advance in the relations with Taliban.
In a separate development, the U.S. finally has something to celebrate in Afghanistan, as Islamabad agreed to lift its 7-month blockade of supplies for NATO troops through its territory. Ironically, opening up of NATO supply routes to Afghanistan is also good news for Taliban, who habitually extort fees from Afghan security firms for not attacking Western convoys.
When Pakistan decided to close down the route in retaliation over U.S. killing of 24 Pakistani troops, the Taliban suffered financially as the funding for the insurgency dried up. A Taliban commander from eastern Ghazni province told the Associated Press, "Stopping these supplies caused us real trouble. Earnings dropped down pretty badly. Therefore, the rebellion was not as strong as we had planned." The U.S. military estimated last year that some $360 million of U.S. tax money ended up in the hands of the Taliban, brokers and common criminals through illegal bribes. Even if not all of this money went to Taliban itself, a small proportion would still constitute millions of dollars that could arm thousands of insurgents.
Of course, it's not only the militants who indirectly rely on U.S. taxpayer for funding. The overall economic situation in Afghanistan tells the same story. According to the World Bank, international donor and military spending is about 97% of the Afghan GDP. So what will happen after the withdrawal is completed and U.S. reconstruction projects finish? According to Hamid Faruqi, a professor of economics at Kabul University, Karzai's government does not have any plan or an economic vision. He said, "They were just happy to see that this transition is taking place, but they were only watching the security and the military effect on the Afghan situation, not the economic and social effect."